welcome back to ThinkTech. I'm Jay Fidell. It's the 10 o'clock block, and this is Talking Tax with Tom Yamachika, the president of the Tax Foundation of Hawaii. And today we're going to talk about but our lawmakers still want to raise taxes. Welcome to the show, Tom.
Thank you for having me on, Jay. Pleasure to be here.
So why the but? I mean, the last time we spoke, they were in fact raising taxes in many ways, or there were many bills to that effect. And now I guess you're questioning whether they should be raising taxes given a change in circumstances. So what's happened?
Well, as you have probably heard in the news, we have a new president, and the new president is sponsoring some legislation to get relief to everybody. It's a $1.9 trillion package. Hawaii will undoubtedly get some of it. And as a result of it, the governor has backed off his intention to furlough people either in July or at any time later. And he's basically telling us, well, looks like we're in the clear. But has that quelled our lawmakers' fervor for entertaining tax proposals? No. And one reason why is because to get us even to the point where we're at now, they've had to borrow lots of money. The state has had to borrow lots of money.
Okay, so it occurred to me that a lot of the policy around tax increases and the like, sort of an approach to the deficit, so to speak, is based on the Council on Revenues, and you follow them, and I wonder how often they meet, because we're in a time of change, and every day is a potential huge change for one reason or another, locally, nationally, what have you. How often does the council meet? Is the council following this stuff? Is the council indicating changes? Is the legislature following the changes the council finds?
I believe the council meets every 3 months, and whenever they do meet, if they revise the revenue forecast, the revenue forecast binds the legislature. So the legislature has to budget based on the revenue numbers that are in COR, the COR's report, COR being Council on Revenues. And our Constitution has provisions that have been interpreted to say we need a balanced budget. So if the proposed expenditures don't match the proposed revenues, something's got to change.
Yeah, okay. Well, every 3 months, but that during the session, that would be, maybe twice, maybe. And you could have a bill that was entirely wrong direction that slips through without regard to a change that happened in between or after those two meetings of the council, no?
Well, I'm not entirely sure how often they are meeting. I think there are provisions for them to meet more often if they want to. I just don't know about that. I think we have received a Council on Revenue report either last month or the month before, so it's not like we're running totally blindly. And it probably is not helpful if the numbers change too often.
Well, yeah, sure. Okay, well, anyway, so what I got from your discussion is that there could be a certain reliance on and complacency about the 1.9 trillion COVID relief bill that could very well get adopted in Congress in the Senate today and then signed immediately by the President Biden. So how much are we relying on that? Are there other factors that are optimistic also that have generated this kind of, I don't want to say complacency, but this kind of revised view of the need to make up a deficit?
Well, I mean, I think everybody's looking at the new case counts. They are dropping, at least for the time being. Honolulu is going to tier 3. That's the next best. Then tier 2, which is what we were in. That's effective today, actually. and uh, hopefully people are taking that as a sign that there are better economic times ahead, and I hope there are better economic times ahead, because the devastation has been horrible.
Yeah,
And
well, okay, but there was a piece in the paper today, the mainland papers, about the variants. And how about, okay, cases are down in some places, but they're up in other places, and that's largely because of the variants. The variants are significantly more infectious, and some scientists feel that they are more lethal. And we do have variants, and the number of variants is increasing. And I guess what happened is because the country wasn't really attending to this last year, and there was so many cases over the Christmas season for one reason or another, that we developed a lot of variants, both imported variants and domestic variants. And those variants, push just the other way. We could go to tier 3 today and wind up with a variant infection, highly infectious tomorrow, and then we'll have to reverse our course, right?
that's right. I mean, it's what tier we are is based on the case count, and that can go up or down. Uh, but
Yeah.
hopefully, hopefully, um, hopefully, we're turning the corner.
Yeah, well, we can. I mean, I think we're entitled to be a little optimistic, at least for a little while, cautiously optimistic and nimble enough to change our direction if we find that our optimism isn't justified. So, okay, so they still want to raise taxes, although there are points that would make you optimistic. Why? Why do they recognize these points? Why are they, heading straight to an increase in taxes?
Well, as Chair Sylvia Luke explained it, she's not comfortable with leaving a $700 million borrowing for the unemployment benefits out there. We borrowed that much from the feds to keep our unemployment payments made, and that money obviously has to be paid back. Um, we don't expect the Congress to tell everybody, oh, don't worry about the money. We'll take care of it. Um, the uh, Even with uh, the COVID relief legislation under President Trump, uh, they did forgive some of the debt, but only the interest that had accrued in 2020.
Yeah, I wonder if we're in for more trouble on this. My general approach these days, in which we talk about in other shows here on ThinkTech, is that Trump left us a legacy we haven't fully understood yet. He left us not only the obvious points of legacy, where he destroyed parts of the government, destroyed parts of policy, and destroyed parts of public opinion, large parts of public opinion. But also, there are things that he did to the government there are things that he set in motion that we don't fully understand, and we're only realizing them now. I mean, in a variety of areas, and it could be that we have other areas to deal with in COVID.
Well,
So,
it seems to me that the immediate area that we have here, in Hawaii, is we need to get our economy rolling again. Um, all tax collections pretty much are based on the economy. If people don't work, they can't pay tax. If businesses don't make money, they can't pay tax. If businesses don't take in gross revenue, they can't pay GE tax.
yeah,
So, all of our specialty taxes, like TransUnicon, uh, and liquor, tobacco, fuel, that all depends on economic transactions. If they don't happen, no tax dollars are generated at all. So we really need to get out of this economic malaise for a variety of reasons, and the government should want us to do that. Now, it's been well documented that adding more taxes puts a brake on economic recovery. You know, and and the brakes are not what we need. We need the gas pedal.
But at the end of the day, the legislature has a brick wall about the constitutional provision over balancing the budget. So, the notion that we don't know how the economy is doing yet. We know one level that is, the COVID relief, but we don't know exactly how the economy is going to react. Whatever happens, we don't know. And there's a lot of businesses, A, that went out of business, or B, that are going out of business as we speak. Not because they're optimistic or pessimistic, because they have no money. That's all that they're done. They're closing their doors, big ones and little ones. And so
Yeah,
that, that's
with
a
all of those
permanent damage to the economy.
yeah, and with all of those casualties, the fact remains that there's a government to run, and there's fewer of us taxpayers left to help with the cost of running it. So, um, I mean, I don't know whether what the legislature wants us to do is to make up for all of the casualties that we did have, which which I don't think is really fair because the government had a role in making those casualties to begin with. Even though they had to do it in the name in the name of public health. So it's not a good or a bad thing, but it was kind of a choice of evils.
Yeah,
And
well, it goes back to the Council on Revenues, or for that matter, the legislature and the money chairs, looking very carefully about how this COVID relief bill is doing, how the economy is doing, what the prospect of increased or decreased tax revenues is, which changes from day to day, because public opinion changes from day to day. Although I'd say a lot of people in this state, as in the country, are depressed about the future. They're confused, depressed. They're not confident. But I want to ask you one more thing. In all of this mix, this tension, this dichotomy between raising taxes and relying on optimistic signs from the federal government or otherwise, what about the notion of reducing expenses? What about the notion of making a systematic, rational, long-awaited reduction in expenses, such as to union organizations, union parts of the economy? Has anything been done? Are there bills pending? Can we have any optimism about that?
well, a lot of the bills having to do with budgeting or uh, you uh, collective bargaining cost items, they're being passed through with largely blank amounts because we don't know what the final numbers are going to be. So it's kind of going to be going down to the wire. Uh, on the general principle, though, I would agree with you. Before we, I think, start, asking, Joe Q. Public to, to dig ever deeper into his pocketbook, I think we have to ask a few questions first, and that is number one: uh, is there any money lying around that isn't doing anything that we should be repurposing? Okay, the state auditors' reports show us that there are lots of dollars lying around that aren't doing it. So we gotta grab those and we gotta use them. Secondly, um, we need to make a judgment as to uh, if we're going to bear pain. Let's all of us need to bear the pain. We're not we're not going to create lots of good feelings if the public feels like one large segment of the population such as the government employee unions have come out either A, scot free, or B, better off than they were before through raises or whatever. Um, if we have a situation where we got a lot of people uh, getting benefits and others having to undergo lots of pain, there will be a lot of distrust uh, in especially if it's as I've described, it's going to be destructive to government. What the heck are they doing? They should be leading by example rather than putting the screws to the rest of us just because they can.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no place for self-interest in the crisis. There's no place for self-interest here. So the other thing I wanted to ask you about, and this is actually a discussion that has pervaded a number of our business talk shows over the past few weeks, and that is reinvigorating the economy, diversifying the economy, finding ways to encourage an innovation economy or a tech economy or an agriculture economy. And the notion being not only that we have to be resilient against a one-horse operation with hospitality, which we still have and which we are still paying an awful price for having. But the other is going on into the future, so we can keep our kids here, so we can make a life for people instead of having them leave and make lives on the mainland. All the benefits of diversification. We've been talking about that since John Burns. And I'm afraid to say we have never achieved it. And legislature after legislature, governor after governor makes a good case for it, but it never actually happens. And I wonder, and now in the time of COVID, now in the time of rethinking, rejiggering our whole state, really, for the future, in the face of all these crises, it would be most appropriate, very appropriate, to think about it and to do something about it. Some kind of incentive, some kind of post-Act 221, some kind of, we love you entrepreneurs bill. But is there any such thing, or has that been lost completely in this legislature?
Well, no, I don't think so. There are a number of bills that are moving to give incentives to various various sectors such as food manufacturing. But when those incentives come up, they tend to go overboard. Like one of them is 100% credit for expenses in food manufacturing or for expenses in uh, you know growing and producing food that we can produce but are not producing now. Okay. The problem that I have with the 100% credit is, you know, you got to have the people who are doing this activity having some skin in the game. If they don't, where is their incentive to do better? Um, if whatever they do, we don't care. The state's paying all the bills, and they just get the profit. Uh, so if number one, we would need to rejigger the incentives like that. Number two, I think just as a matter of general principle, the government needs to be transparent and the government needs to keep its promises. Uh, Part of the the science of doing business is you need to know what the rules are and the rules need to be stable. We can't have departments going in there and say, oh, we changed our mind, or a government going in there and saying, oh, we changed our mind. Here are the new rules. Pray we don't alter the deal any further. To quote Darth Vader.
Well,
A lot of
but
happening.
this is go ahead.
A lot of that's actually happening. You see, for example, there's a tax information release that just came out by the Department of Taxation regarding the movie credit, and it basically says, "Hey, we told you back in 2008 and 2009 that we're going to be treating movie production companies as manufacturers, which is a more favorable classification." Um, and we invited taxpayers to rely on it, but those weren't final rules, and we're now changing our mind. That's what this says. Um, so, and these tend to be the more high profile, big dollar people in the TV film and production industry that are affected. So you have your principal cast, have your directors, producers, director of photography, people like that who are being affected by this. Um, if you're going to change the rules, tell people you're changing the rules and tell them why. Don't just say, "Oh, we changed it our mind." Huh? I mean, come on. We're supposed to be a government of laws. If that position is justified under the law, reason from the law that was passed, and say, this is the conclusion. Um, we made a mistake before. Here's what the real answer is. It's based on the law. Here's the law. Bang, bang, bang. Not just
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I mean, that goes to the whole thing about permitting, TMT gets a permit, well, and they spend, I don't know, hundreds of millions getting the permit. And when TMT gets the permit and it does everything that the law required it to do, it gets the exact permit the law requires it to have. Well, we didn't mean it. We were just kidding you. And even now, my understanding is the legislature is creating a special commission of people who are going to negotiate something or try to negotiate something with the consortium. Again, throwing the whole baby out with the bath. There's no resolution. It never comes to an end. And if you follow the law, that's no assurance you're going to get what you wanted or what you asked for. So, and we've seen that so many times in Hawaii, and it filters down to even this tax information relief, tax information memorandum, which actually sounds terribly unfair to me. It's that notion of that they will come. They will come whether we offer them a soft landing or not. They will come because they love us so much. They don't care if we beat them up. And I think that's really the wrong attitude when you're looking for foreign investment, offshore investment. This is a time, actually, it's another point that we should discuss. This is a time to encourage offshore investment, not a time to discourage it. If you want to rebuild the economy, you need investment. You're not going to get a lot of investment locally, sorry. Even with the big capital concentrations in the state, you have to get it from the mainland or from Asia. And you have to be solid about that.
Have you seen the transient accommodations bill that's going through both the House and the Senate? That's the one that basically says we are going to tie the transient accommodations tax to the visitor count, and if the visitor count goes up, so does the tax. So we are pushing people away. Is that the policy we want to espouse here? We want to be the banana republic and say, Yankee go home or tourists go home. We don't need you.
That's what it amounts to in that bill. I mean, I like the idea of algorithms that are responsive and nimble, about tax, so everybody can see it. But there's always a takeaway. There's always a message. And if you say we're going to increase the taxes with a greater number of tourists, you're saying, why don't you guys go and shoot yourself in the foot? Bring in more tourists, we'll tax you more. There's something basically regressive about that.
Yeah, my reaction to that is we got to get a consistent message going. Like if you really want to tell tourists stay home, let's go defund all of our tourism marketing. We're throwing millions and hundreds of millions of dollars at tourism marketing, and if we want them to stay home, let's save our money because that's not what we want to do.
Yeah, it's a bad message. Just nobody's thinking, nobody's coordinating. This is the leadership thing. We've talked about it before. Somebody in state government has to coordinate these bills. And it's not really the purview of the legislature. It's the fellow with the initiatives. It's the governor and his staff and his department heads. And I'm not sure they're doing that. I don't think they are doing that. But let's go back to the individual sector we want to encourage. Let's say, just for example, it's agriculture. The idea is to throw enough money at it so that you will attract people to it. If the kids coming out of school with, say, agricultural degrees are not going into agriculture, you have to make it better, easier for them. And then, of course, and you make it rich. I'd rather err on the side of making it a little too rich than too poor. And then the question, and I'm really posing this question to you, Tom. Then the question is, how long do you leave it in place? Let's assume it's rich or even too rich, but you're getting people to come. You're actually building that sector. Great. We want that, even if it costs too much, because the sector pays back later. So question is, what kind of sunsets do you put in there? How often do you review it? When do you knock it off entirely? We've had a lot of tax credits that I think were badly formed because they didn't pay enough attention to how long it lasted and when it sunset. What do you think?
And there's actually a process on the books right now where tax credits do get reviewed every I think every 5 years on a rolling basis by the auditor. Um, and I think that's a useful exercise. And uh, tax credits are meant to be a stimulation or a stimulus to various sectors of the economy, but they're not they shouldn't be permanent.
You think
Unless there's a really really good reason for it.
you think that
So
review provision by the auditor every 5 years is adequate? That's like the Council on Revenue's question, how often do you want them to meet? How often do you want them to opine and analyze and opine? 5 years seems to me a long time when you're throwing a lot of money at a given sector and hoping and believing, insisting that that sector grow within 5 years. It may a year or two, whatever it might be. One of the things about 221 is that the people who attack 221 rest them. These people always said it's not moving fast enough. If we're going to give a tax credit, we want to see an immediate reaction, an immediate result in the economy. We want to see a huge number of tech businesses right now. What's holding you up? Why isn't it working? Let's kill it. That was their analysis.
yep. Um, I think there are a lot of unrealistic assumptions being engaged in by some of the people down there, not all. Um, we just want to make sure that uh, we want to make sure that people there are listening to the truth and making realistic assumptions, that they know how business actually works. Uh, but uh, if they're making life and death decisions about the future of business in Hawaii, they really should know how business actually works.
Yeah. Well, if they're making life and death decisions about businesses in Hawaii, they're making life and death decisions about Hawaii. We
Yeah.
need to have a viable business community. And I'm afraid that's being undermined by COVID. It's being undermined by our failure to respond to COVID. This is the time when the legislature has to be smartest of all. This is a time when they need to rely on experts and look at it on a very, repeated and nimble basis. This is a time when we have to refashion our economy and make sure it doesn't go over the side. I can see a lot of young people leaving when these businesses don't come back. So we're almost out of time, Tom, and I wanted to ask you a really simple question. What should we do?
Well, one of the things that we ought to do is, help our business sector as much as we can. Again, that's the driver of our tax revenue, and we need to help that sector by having clear policies, having consistent policies, and having consistent policies that the government is speaking with one voice. Otherwise, you get all of these inconsistent effects and uh, taking with one hand and giving with the other. Uh, the examples are too numerous to mention, but it's happening all the time. We need to kind of cut that out and act consistently toward getting our economic recovery in order.
Yeah, not easy, requires attention 24/7. Now, so let's go back to the title of our show. Do we still want to raise taxes this year? And what is your suggestion? What should we do about that now, knowing all that we know right now in the month of March? Well, almost the month of March.
my suggestion is, you know, we've borrowed money. We don't have to pay it all back right away. Uh, the the thing that we need to do is to make sure our economic engine is restarted and running, and then we pay back the money that we borrowed. Trying to, I think, front that by uh, disproportionately burdening everybody now is going to be a mistake because it's going to cause our economic engine to collapse. Especially right now when we're really reeling because of the pandemic. We can't you know we can't push our engine off to the side and hope it's going to right itself because it won't.
No, it won't. And if we, again, just like the question of the economy in general, if we tax the people coming into the market, coming into the wage earner or home buyer group, if there is any, they're going to leave town. If you want to tax them too much, they'll go to a state which doesn't have taxes or has less. The third question, I'm sorry?
There's a lot of states that have less.
Yeah, right, right. And this is a time for transition. People are doing transition all over the place. The country is in a
Lawmakers
transition.
really need to realize that people can vote with their feet. They can buy a plane ticket. They can be out of here.
Yeah,
Do they know this?
right.
At population X, do they know this?
So the last thing is, like the government workers unions, the government employees unions. It troubles me that while other parts, other sectors of the economy, they get to pay more taxes, they lose their jobs, they lose their businesses, what have you. But the government employees unions keep on trucking, and they don't give up a dime, and they fight hard to keep for their self-interest.
But it's the job. That's what they're created for. So
Right.
I can't really fault them for doing their job.
Yeah,
What I can fault is um, our lawmakers who are supposed to have all of our interests at heart for kind of unleveling the playing field.
what it amounts to. So that is my third question to you is, what do we do about that? What should the legislature do about that in this year of trying to figure out where the state is going, trying to deal with these multiple crises, and of course, the fiscal crises first? What should they do about reducing expenses when dealing with, the government employees sectors of the economy?
I think they really should look very carefully at reducing expenses because and finding that money that's not being used because I'm sure at least especially in the bigger organizations there's always stuff there, and the more it's still the more it's kept secret, harder it is to find. So we need more transparency, and we need to once we find what that is, we can address that.
So we're going into crossover, I think, in a couple of weeks. Is there time for the legislature to undertake any of these things?
It's always time. Really continuously.
It's always time, and actually, right now, it's time. It's time to end our show, Tom. We're out of time. Thank you so much, Tom Yamachika, President, Tax Foundation of Hawaii. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. I'm sure there'll be much more to discuss. Aloha.
Thank you for having me on the show.